My name is Johnn Noflin. What you seeing right now?
It's been awful how they did us on religion. And our people tend to think that even those who feel that they know that white Americans have mistreated us, their grandchildren and great-grandchildren still mistreat us in a lot of ways. They still believe but nobody will lie about God. When that's not true. People who are trying to subjugate another people and turn them into slaves, not just physically, but mentally, then they certainly would try to teach them that God looks like me.
A lot of people say it doesn't matter what Jesus looked like, it doesn't matter what God looked like or other deities. But the thing is, if it did not matter what Jesus looked like, why don't they show what the original paintings and pictures of Jesus look like? Why don't they show what the original paintings and pictures of the disciples look like? Because that's very important to know if it doesn't matter.
Michelangelo was told by the Pope to put the picture of the Holy Family on the roof of the chapel. Michelangelo said and the Pope specifically told him to make it European. Michelangelo explained to him that there are no models of a European Holy Family. And so he said, you'll think it's something he did. He used his family.
We thought the only guy we had was the one that white people gave us, which was Jesus, was gay. And he looked like them. And when we saw them, psychologically, we were transferred that was deity. If it really was not important what he looked like, then why didn't he look like some of the majority of the people on earth? Why would he look like the people who are the minority race on the entire earth? We're not the minority.
People always ask me, why do the black church not get rid of the white Jesus and put a blue black Jesus in place with a nappy head? Because black people will stop coming.
And not only did they hide the color of religious figures throughout Europe, they would hide the colors of other very important people, especially royalty in Europe. A lot of old paintings in Europe, they clearly show African-looking deities. They show the Black Madonna and Child. This is all throughout Europe. They show black pictures of Jesus. They show African-looking disciples all over Europe.
Everything that you're looking at in the Roman Catholic Church today is the exact copy of what they got from Egypt. The high priest, the regular priest, you got the cardinals, you got the bishop, and then you got the pope at time. So you had the pharaohs, you had the high priest, you had the priest, and so you have the same type of categorization of people as they're placed in the temple, but their purposes and what they were telling was different.
When racism rose, because racism was a system, and prior to the system of racism evolving as a necessary instrument for the maintenance and protection of the European genotype, Europeans, for many intents and purposes, I would say just about worship African people. First two folks are black.
You have one named Saint Victor, you have one named Saint Gelasius, you have one pope named Saint Matthias. There was another brother named Saint Benedict, who was a patron saint in Europe, well known throughout Italy.
Militatus was a black pope. Militatus was the pope during the Council of Nicaea.
And we've had these brothers who were worshipped throughout Europe and Italy, and we don't talk about it in America, but they're well known in Europe. You have one brother, Saint Maurice, who's a well-known martyr and a religious figure throughout Europe. You see his statues all over the place.
Many of those who early on helped to formulate what is modern-day Christianity in Greece and Rome were also African.
When you look at Christianity, you're dealing with the Armenian priesthood that's coming directly out of ancient Kemet. You're dealing with the rites and rituals of Osiris, the passions of Osiris, the idea of the resurrection of the dead, and his son coming forward in the room as his living testament to his life. Set, who the Greeks call Isis, is the essence of who Mary is. Meditate, who is her sister, is who Mary Magdalene is. So that when you look at Christianity, I mean, even when you look at the word Christ or Torah, you get with Ka rest. Ka means spirit and rest means to rise. The Romans learned the passion of Osiris through the Greek, and the Greeks learned it through the Kemites or the Africans from Egypt. So that it was just a retelling of the same story, superimposing things that they thought they knew, and that becomes what we today call Christianity. Judaism, that is not Judaism. That comes directly out of the river, Apio Nile. And that is why Moses himself was said to be initiated into the priesthood of ancient. In fact, today, if you were to go to Africa and talk to the children who've been Christianized, they will tell you that their ancestors covenanted with devils, and this is why black people are in the condition they are today. So, from turn to Christianity, and of course, you turn to the oppressor's religion, and then you eat the gruel that they give you, and at the bottom it says Jesus saved you. Of course, you're conditioning that person for another 1,000 years.
The falsehood of Christianity has taken a toll on black relationships because really when women are taught, or women and men, but when you're taught as a female that God and Jesus is white, you're going to look at white as somewhat of a savior figure. And you're going to look at the men in your life a little differently.
Time to just work on that more. We need to stop going to church every Sunday, trying to get along with them and trying to get along with the people at home. Some people leave home mad, but they go to church and go in there. They love the pastor. They love Jesus because there's no accountability. Jesus ain't going to say, pull your dress down, come in off the street, go clean up the house. You know, Jesus ain't going to tell them that. And if he do, they ain't going to listen to that.
There is only one race on the planet, and that is the human race. And because of biological climatology, this race was born, nurtured, sustained, civilized, educated in Africa. And Dr. Clark teaches us that after they got their show together, then they took it on the world.
The origin of the name Europe comes from a Phoenician goddess named Europa. So the origin of the name Europe has an African origin because the Phoenicians, we're still dealing with black African people, the Canaanites and all that. When we talk about Phoenicians, we're still talking about black folks.
The first Europeans were a group of Africans called the Grimaldi, who had migrated from Africa to Europe between 40 and 60,000 years ago. And in the process of evolution, many of them lost the Africoid genotype, the phenotypical features, and then went on to look more European-esque. You even see in pre-racist Europe, Africans and Europeans are living side by side. In fact, a lot of European families have an African background that they don't like to acknowledge.
Queen Charlotte, she was a woman of African descent, and this is well known throughout Europe. There was another guy, King Charles. Many people say that he has an African origin as well, that he has African ancestry. King Charles was referred to as the black boy growing up because he was so dark. And they have pubs over in Europe now called the Black Boy Pub or the Black Boy Inn, which refers to King Charles. There's also knowledge about King Charles being a descendant of the De Medici family. The De Medici family out of Europe, out of Italy, they're known to have that African bloodline as well. One of the De Medicis, Alessandro De Medici, who was a ruler in Italy, you look at pictures of him, this dude looks like Ryan Leslie. So you can see that African bloodline running through a lot of these people of royal descent. There were blacks in Scotland. There was one black Scottish king named Kenneth the Dove. There are figurines and carvings of black Scots.
The Celtic Druids was the African priesthood that had gone into Europe and had inhabited the islands of what we today call Ireland, inhabited what we today call so-called Great Britain, Scotland, and Wales. It inhabited Holland, inhabited Denmark, was all up in there.
Many Greeks and Romans were biracial. To use the modern terms, they were biracial. Their look, could not readily on the surface be absolutely identified as European or black because many of them was of a biracial stock.
Hannibal Barca, the great military genius, he comes from an African background. In a lot of movies and on television shows, they will try to Europeanize and whiten up the image of Hannibal Barca, but he was definitely a man of African descent. There are even coins throughout Europe and North Africa of Hannibal showing him. Many historians say that there's a coin of a black man and there's an elephant on the other side, and people say that that is Hannibal.
Yes, Hannibal Barca was one of the greatest warriors that ever lived. And what he did, what he accomplished, is now still a matter of study in all of the world's military colleges. what he did by bringing together, he had the power to bring different factions together. He had different, the Celts, he had the African horsemen, he had different types of armies. So when he went against Rome, they didn't know who to fight because there were so many different styles of warfare. And when you had such a genius and a brilliant man at 22, actually orchestrating after his father, of course, taught him everything he knew, brought him on campaigns to teach him, he came back and actually took his father's genius to the next level. Septimus Severus was African, and he was the one that actually took the fight, took the Roman fight up north into England.
The Russian language that we know today can be attributed to a black man named Alexander Pushkin. He created the modern Russian language because they were speaking French and other types of language there.
Had it not been for someone like Alexander Pushkin, Russians would be speaking French today.
A lot of people say that people like Leonardo da Vinci and Sir Isaac Newton, they created a lot of inventions in Europe, but a lot of their inventions can be attributed to the African presence that was in Europe because there was a strong African presence and they were bringing in science and mathematics, so that's where all that came from.
Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo, you know, all of the study with African people, they didn't come up with this. And when people talk about Leonardo da Vinci, the only question that I have as it relates to Leonardo da Vinci is who was his teacher? Who taught Leonardo da Vinci brain anatomy?
Think about it. Think about it. Who taught him?
Tell me
We did.
They can't tell you who the teacher is.
We did.
The teacher is, they have to tell you they were black.
Marco Polo, he was considered to be one of the first Europeans to make it over into Eastern Asia. And what Marco Polo did, he took something known as the Silk Road into Asia. And the Silk Road was already established by African and other Aboriginal people. And the Silk Road, they would travel this road and they would trade garments. And this is why Italy has always been known to be a fashion mecca. People always talk about the quality of Italian.
We gave them fashion.
When we talk about Italian fashion, where did they get that fashion sense from? See, the Italians got that fashion sense from the Moors and the Africans that went in there. They brought those silk garments and all those fly clothes into Europe. Even the concept of alligator shoes, which is attributed to Italy, the thing is, alligators are not indigenous to Italy. Crocodiles are not indigenous to Italy. So where did they get those alligator skins and those crocodile skins? They got those from Africa. The Moors brought that in. The players wear shoes called Maori gaiters. Those are some of the most popular shoes around among players.
Player.
The word Maori is a variation of the word Moorish. So we have to know all this stuff. All that is our stuff. That's African stuff.
If you look at art, art tends to follow a certain type of a zeitgeist, a certain type of a mindset. People tend not to just wake up and paint one picture in America that looks identical to a picture that was painted in Africa thousands of years ago. Okay? And so whenever you see a piece of art, you can best believe that it was inspired by something that was seen prior to. In fact, when you look at some of the great European artists, okay, Van Gogh, and all these types of guys, you will see a lot of their art was inspired by the so-called dark art of West Africa. There has been studies that have put the pieces of Van Gogh and others up next to pieces of traditional African cultural art in West Africa. That art that would be considered negative, underworldly, dark, and demonic. But the great European artists copied what was considered by Europe some of the lowest and most primitive forms of artwork that went on to be considered some of the most successful by them.
Another very important African figure in Europe was a black man by the name of Angelo Solomon. He was a guy, he was a war, he was a celebrity in Europe, in Austria. He was also known as the father of pure Masonic thought because he was a Mason as well. And this guy, when he died, they literally stuffed his body. They skinned him and stuffed his body, and they would have him on display in certain places. So he was a very important figure in Europe.
Suleiman taught Moses. Who's Suleiman? Suleiman is a Moor. He's an African. Who's Beethoven? Beethoven was sold in Bay. He was a Moor.
His mother was a Moor. Yes. And when he went deaf, that melanin kicked in. He and I kicked in. Hearing music, the better way he was deaf than he heard it otherwise. There's also another myth that he cut the webbing of his hand down to the bone so that he can get a better stretch. So that some of the 32nd chords that he had, he plays, and most people can't play. They need like two people playing. That's why some people, in certain instances, you see two people playing victim, two pianos playing victim. That's because of what he did when he stretched his finger.
Beethoven was called a Moor when he was growing up. Beethoven, there's a book about him called Beethoven's Hair because people were so infatuated with the texture of his hair. So that African bloodline runs real deep throughout Europe. And again, he was called a Moor, and the Moors were very important throughout Europe. And it's funny, the importance of the Moor was so deep in Europe, but we rarely hear about them in history books today.